Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Supernatural, the latest episode of Legacies, as well as the latest episode of Evil. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Supernatural, you can skip to what I have to say about this week's episode of Legacies, and/or skip to what I have to say about this week's episode of Evil. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Supernatural. A great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. So let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we kind of get our kind of cold open where it's like those three, it's like, oh, we're celebrating. Yeah, we just graduated college. And I'm like, oh, that's just going to make it more depressing. And in fact, this some monster ends up attacking them. And obviously this, sends Sam and Dean on a case. And they're showing up as, fish and wildlife officers or whatnot. And I love that, Sam and Dean's badges, basically the photos that are used are basically of Jensen and Jarrett from the beginning of the series, and so it's like, hey, and I love Dean being like, oh yeah, look at me, I look the exact same, and Sam's like, yeah, sure. He's like, come on, look, I look the same. It's so interesting. It is kind of funny to see, and it's, of course, they're going to do this, in the final season and everything, so you got to look back on stuff like that, and it's like, man, it's crazy. They've changed quite a bit while still staying the same in certain regards. It is kind of interesting. But I love that's a bit in the episode where Dean shows off his badge and people are like, that's you? And he's almost kind of like, and especially because the sheriff said it's just like, that's you? If you say so. He was almost like, what do you mean if I say so? That's me. It looks exactly like me now. I love that being a bit. But nevertheless, the sheriff doesn't believe this to be some wild animal attack. It just seemed to calculate it. So it's like she's thinking, hey, must be a person. And then, whoever it is must be a monster. So it's like, okay. So it turns out they're missing hearts and everything. And then there's this interesting aspect of obviously they go and meet with the only survivor, Ashley. She's got a scar on her face, which immediately my brain went is she going to turn into a werewolf? But it's like, no, it doesn't work with just simply a scratch. You have to bite is what the whole thing is with the werewolf, right? Because I guess it depends on the continuity, because some continuity is just a scratch is enough. Teen Wolf is a scratch, but it can also be a bite as well. But that's what came up. No, it's purely a bite. It's not even a scratch. It is a bite, right? I'm blanking on werewolf rules. We're talking werewolves 1-on-1, but I feel like it changes from continuity to continuity, but maybe it's always been werewolf bites and I'm just being stupid. But regardless, I just, they're trying to make, in particular, Dean's trying to make her feel comfortable and being like, hey, whatever you want to say I attacked you, we believed you. She's like, it was a man, but it was a monster. Yeah, it was a werewolf. She's like, but werewolves on this. Is like, no, trust me, being my bro, we deal with these type of things. We'll keep you safe and everything. So name and go and visit the two brothers, and immediately my brain is like, oh, okay, so I think the brother's name, one is Andy, I think the other one's name is Josh, but it's like you could definitely see the parallels that they were already making in episodes, right, Sam and Dean with their whole situation, the whole looking after each other thing, and we see that kind of reflected amongst these brothers. But it turns out Josh is the one who killed the other girls. Andy wasn't all for it. It's like, no, we weren't going to hunt humans. And then he ends up letting Ashley go, because it's like, as long as my brother thinks you're dead and you don't bring too much attention back to us, this will never come back to us, so he'll never know. Which I always like that being an aspect of this show. It's always led to complicated situations. I mean, we even dealt with it last episode, with people finding out, when they're, different people try to hold on to their humanity even when they become supernaturals. Because I'm blanking on her name, but it's the girl who ended up becoming a werewolf, and then she ended up turning her sister into a werewolf to save her life, but her sister went off killing and stuff like that, and she basically helped Sam and Dean stop her sister. That was a couple seasons ago, if I remember correctly, but it was that type of thing of people who do fight their supernatural side to try and hold on. You can see that Andy kind of represents that, but obviously Josh doesn't. So it's like, we need to kill that girl. Oh, obviously, Sam and Dean, pick up Ashley and they're taken to the hotel so they can look after her. And it's so sweet because her and Dean have this heart to heart about everything, about like, do you like your job? Which he's like, yeah, I do. I mean, don't get me wrong, it comes with a lot of bad. I mean, and we've, as an audience have come to see that bad. It's like, it's a thankless job. You lose a lot of people, but at the very least, you're able to help people. You're able to save people's lives. It's not what he wanted. And that's the thing, because out of anyone, I guess Dean kind of accepted it, because obviously Sam always kind of fought and rebelled against the hunter life, but Dean embraced it a lot more, especially because it's just like after, I guess, losing their mom, he had the same incentive as their dad and just wanting to save people. It's like what I'm good at, like he always kind of jumped at this life a little bit more than Sam did. He kind of, went for it a little more than Sam did, but because I guess once again, because in his mind it's like, despite everything, how crappy the life can be, and obviously it got crappier the more and more time they've spent doing this, because they've lost so much over these 15 years, that the fact of the matter is, of course, it's not going to, be exactly the same, but for him it's still the thing of, hey, I get to save lives. So and then you have her saying that thing of like, it seems like it was such a random act, and so the fact is, like, kind of makes you wonder what life would be like if everything was planned out, which obviously they've been through that. So Dean's like, no, it wouldn't be better. So I just thought that was I was like, oh, that's a nice parallel they're setting up there. I also like the fact is that they immediately set it up to be like, okay, Sam's saying this line of like, don't you think it's a little too easy? And Dean's like, oh, I like easy. And then immediately my brain is like, well, we know last episode Chuck put his plans in the order of like, he's written everything down. So I'm like, okay, so it's got to be a thing of like, this must be part of his grand plan and everything like that, especially because Sam is having those dreams and we saw things go down differently. So I'm like, is this supposed to be like an alternate future? And then they start clicking. And I was like, no, this is different ways Chuck is planning on potentially finishing this thing off, which turns out to be the case. But I love that it takes even more twists. Obviously, when we get to it, obviously, like, Dean ends up being like, whoa, he wakes up and Sam's like, yo, Ashley's gone, what's up with that? And it's like, wait, how did he fall asleep? How did the werewolves get this? It's like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense. So it's like, okay, something's, but then I start thinking like, okay, it's got to be because Chuck is interfering. So he must have just kind of, it's like, I think it's one of those things of just kind of like, who cares about the details? That's just like, from a writing standpoint, it's like, oh, Dean fell asleep. We're not going to worry too much about how it happened or why it happened. He just did. Oh, Ashley got taken. Whatever the case may be. And luckily, Sam and Dean show up in time. But it is a situation of, it's a tragedy where it's like Andy decides to kill his brother because it's like he recognizes, like, his brother said like, oh no, I'm gonna stop, but he's like, no, my brother has no intention of stopping, so I've got to end this here. Which immediately my brain kind of goes one direction of thinking like, you can't know for sure, is that really how their story is going to play out, or is it just because of Chuck's manipulation? I'm just like, everything throughout the entire series has basically gone the way Chuck has wanted to, except for like these past few episodes, because these past few episodes have been episodes where they were kind of technically free from God's manipulation and grasp, at least momentarily. But the thing is, like, there is basically no free will under these circumstances, because it seems like everything, because you're going to even make the argument, it's like, well, Sam and Dean being, so dedicated to this cause of helping people, it's like, I mean, is that really them? It brings into question stuff like that. I mean, maybe it's just, Chuck amplifying what's already there, but, So, and that even makes me wonder, like, Josh going off and killing those girls, like, there was probably no issue before then, but that was probably the first slip up. So it's probably like, well, God probably pushed him to do that. So it wasn't 100% on Josh. It was because of them, because it makes you wonder, like, because it's all meant to, create drama and tragedy. So even Andy killing his own brother, it's because the whole point is it's supposed to be reflective of Sam and Dean, that no matter what the case may be. I mean, because it's also supposed to be reflective on the show, because what has been the case, Sam and Dean have always sacrificed themselves for the other. So, it kind of being the opposite spectrum, that being like being driven to the point of whatever circumstances, whether it be Sam going like basically going demon and being unstoppable, or for whatever reason Dean getting the mark of Cain back. I wonder how God was going to swing that. Maybe it's just a thing of like, It makes you wonder something, getting super meta. I wonder, are those possible endings for the show, or is that where they kind of potential? Are those endings they were like, oh, we could have like alternate endings they came up with of like, oh, we'll do it like this and that, but they decided to go super meta with it, so we'll make these possible endings that we were coming up with. Or maybe they're endings that maybe even like fans have come up with and over the years, and they're kind of bringing them to the screen and just kind of be like, nope, this ain't how it ends. But I mean, that'd be super meta. And, I don't know if they do that, but it's interesting to think about. Like, maybe from the beginning, maybe those were endings that they decided like, oh, like those were in the workings from the very beginning of wherever we end the show that these, and maybe as the show progressed, like they gained more to be like, oh, maybe this could be applied to the, I don't know. It could be definitely overthinking it. But then I didn't see it coming with the whole Ashley thing. I was like, get off of me. And then she falls back. I'm like, and she dies. And it's like, what the hell? I'm like, is this supposed to be like some fucked up thing where God messes with them, where it's like, oh man, no matter what you do, like you couldn't save her. You had this heart to heart with her. I thought that was it. And I'm like, and the way they're focused on her, I'm like, she's about to get up. You're not human, are you? She gets up and it's like, okay, what the hell are you? And then she does the white eye. She like rolls her eyes and just shows her white pupils. I'm like, I lost my damn mind, dude. I was like, that was such a great reveal. I don't care who you are. There's no way you could have seen that coming. Lilith? Holy shit, that's such a good twist, dude. I'm like, holy crap, because you sure as hell thought she was dead. I was like, holy crap, that was so good. Because also, she's like, just like Yellow Eyes was the only one with yellow eyes. Oh no, because I forgot the other princes of hell. Well, he wasn't a prince of hell, was he? No, he wasn't. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Never mind. I was about to say, because the other princes of hell had the yellow eyes too, if I remember correctly. But regardless, like, because that wide-eyed thing, it's her signature. But it was like, Lilith, it's like, you're supposed to be dead. It's like, well, yeah, but then I was in the empty. I'm like, oh god, dude. Like I said, literally every character, like demon or is there in the empty, because angels and demons go there. I'm surprised we still have never circled back to purgatory, because that's where that's where supernaturals like werewolves and vampires go. So I'm surprised we still haven't circled back to that in some shape or form. But I mean, there's always the future, that we could do that at some point during the season. But regardless, it's like, how are you back? It's like, oh yeah, because the boss man got me out of the empty. And it's like, oh, who did he let out? Who got you out? God, of course. Which shows it, showing just how powerful he is. I guess even the empty has to bend to his will, which is kind of interesting. Because it almost seems like the empty literally only let Castiel out because it's like, oh, you're hurting me. But then it was like, we almost saw that Lucifer thing go down. So that had to be God interfering too. But like, just for dramatic purposes, oh yeah, he's almost getting him out. You almost got him out. So I was like, man, that's nuts to kind of think about. Freaking Lilith, that is nuts. So that was really interesting. And even kind of bringing up the whole thing of like, she can't do anything what she wants to do, because for her it's like she's stuck playing this stupid game that God set in motion of like, yeah, the story, she's kind of, even as powerful as she is, even she has to bend to how God's will, which is interesting because Chuck isn't as powerful as he was before, but he's still powerful enough that literally the only person that can match him in power is Amara. Because she could easily beat him now, but she's not trying to. It's like, you're stuck wherever you are, bro. I just want to get the hell away from you. I'm not even trying to fight you. She doesn't care about humanity enough like that to fight for them like that. So it's like, it's not worth it. I'm going to stay here, do my own thing. And so even Lilith can't challenge, him. So she's kind of stuck playing this role and everything. I even love it. And she was like, yeah, I was supposed to play into this whole thing. You were meant to see them kill each other. And I was supposed to, get close to Dean and then like seduce him or whatever. And then it's like, I guess it's too late for that, huh? And then you almost have Dean having this look on his face like, almost like there was a part of him thinking about it. But that was interesting. Let's see things kind of play out like that. And even her kind of bringing up the fact is that, once again, the whole purpose is that this is God's plan. It's like he could end the world at any moment in time, but he has to be him. He's so obsessed with being a writer and his great creation, supernatural. So it's like, I got to end it off in a splash, and the best way to end it is with the Grand Late Resistance of I butchered that so fucking hard. the finale being like, oh, one of them killing the other. Obviously, all of Sam's dreams have been about him killing Dean in some shape or form, but obviously the last one, while he was unconscious, was of Dean killing him. So, showing that it is meant to go either way. So I was like, that's fascinating. And so Lilith, I like what they did, because it's like, oh, Lilith's threatening to cut him like one by one, like with like 1,000 cuts. Luckily, Sam shows up with a what was it he said specifically? It was a demon sealing bullet, and because they ended up shooting her, even though she didn't die, she gets stuck in place because the bullet's still inside of her. And it's like, and Sam is like, don't make me kill you again, because I did it before. And I love her being like, you killed me because I let you kill me. And it's like, when you actually think about it, it's like, whoa, that's actually kind of crazy to think about it. I guess that shows you she is the mother of all demons. So I guess that shouldn't definitely be too much of a surprise, but it's well, definitely mother to like the because I don't know if because she is mother, because I think mythologically speaking she's mother to demons, but yeah, I think she's mother to all demons. I think she definitely was like that for the princes of hell, because she made them, kind of to be like Lucifer's special soldiers and whatnot. But I was like, holy crap, dude. That the fact of the matter is that she is that damn powerful. She's able to pop out the bullet and everything. And I was like, yeah, you literally only won because I was like, what was the one thing I wanted more so than everything? To get Lucifer freed. So it's like, yeah, I was willing to die for it. Just, showing how dedicated she was to the cause and everything. I mean, it's kind of similar to like the Ruby thing. Like, Ruby was kind of down for the cause as well, in the grand scheme of things. So I'll admit it, I'm always a sucker for like the whole, like, I guess you could call it a trope, the whole thing of like, oh, I was holding back the entire time. I didn't show you my true power or my true form. But this is a more extreme version of that, because it's like, oh no, I literally let myself be killed, not showing you what I'm truly capable of. But now I don't have to worry about those stipulations, but she still kind of has to fall into the parameters that God set, because it's like, she can't kill them. The whole point was to look for the gun. When they tried to run away, she just froze them where they were standing, and then she ended up, devil trap is the word I was looking for earlier, but I couldn't remember. It just clicked in my head. So I know I hate when I have brain farts like that. Regardless, she ends up taking the gun and melting it. The one thing that probably could maybe hurt God, because we see like ever since that bullet, he's lost a lot of power to the point he can't leave this world anymore. So that probably would have been their go-to answer. But Lilith's like, yeah, I'm done for now. Toodaloo. So it's kind of like, oh, we're definitely going to be seeing some more Lilith. Once again, the season of familiar faces. I love it, dude. I am so excited. I mean, to be fair, it's Lilith too. She loves shifting bodies and stuff like that, so it's like, who's to say she'll look like Ashley the next time we see her? Maybe she will, maybe she won't. I'm very interested to see in that regard. So that's another headache for them to deal with, especially because, Dean brought it up of like, I thought we were free, but now we're back in this situation again. It's just like we take one step forward and we literally take 15 season steps back when you actually kind of think about it in the grand scheme of things. 14 if you want to get really technical about it, but still, it's kind of interesting to think about in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, you thought you broke free of basically our entire lives being under your control, but now it's like, nope, that's not the case. So that's interesting. Now, Sam ends up piecing it together that the bullet wound basically connects him and God together. So he's seeing God's endings. So it's like, how do they do that? How they're going to deal with this? It's like, how do you kill God? Especially because the only weapon that was around that probably could have dealt with him is gone now. So what that means for them, I mean, it does put them in a very unique position that they can kind of sidestep potentially stuff that he might be sending away. I mean, obviously Sam is tapping into the endings. If he probably pushed himself under certain circumstances, he could probably read a lot more. And obviously there's also the little subplot of like they're trying to get in contact with Cass, because Sam looks at Dean's phone and is like, oh, or was that his own phone? I would assume that was supposed to be Dean's phone, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Sam's phone, of just trying to get in contact with Cassio, who he's, because he's still under the impression like, well, we're free and everything and make our own choices, but it's like, I can't be around you guys just because all you see are the mistakes I made and stuff like that. So it's just, I get blamed for it's just, I need to kind of find my own start, which I guess maybe the next episode we kind of focus on Cassio, where he is, what he's been up to and stuff like that. So I'm interested to find out what. I think it's going to probably be something very interesting in the sense that it probably won't be any biggie, or maybe it's a thing of like, no, he's been doing what he's been doing with the Winchesters, just now kind of on his own. I'm curious to see how that really works out for him if he potentially goes down that route, but still some very, very interesting circumstances we find ourselves in. I am so excited to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. And now moving on to this week's episode of Legacies. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. But first and foremost, we pick up with Lizzie tracking down Hope, and it says her name and everything, and it's like, holy crap. I was curious, like, the flashback made me think, like, okay, was it just fragments she remembered? It was like, nope, she fully remembers everything. And I'm like, dude. And even Hope's getting so excited. She's like, oh, let's hug. But, Lizzie's like, before we kind of get reunited as former frenemies and everything, we got to stop Landon and Josie from doing it. And it's like, obviously, hearing that kind of shocks. It's like, holy crap, like to know that, it's one thing to know that they're together and they're in love, but to know that it's just kind of another thing. It's kind of like the current girlfriend that, that complicated situation of your boyfriend forgets about you because you went inside of this massive pit that ended up being his father. And so he completely doesn't remember your existence, that age-old tale. So there's that complicated situation. But I love this introduces the next monster to be released from Malivore, and it's this lady, and she's like from the 80s and whatever, and it's like, okay, what the hell is this? But then she's like a keeper of the game, and it turns out that Hope and Lizzie get trapped inside of a game, which was really interesting. I even love they get like that 8-bit title card for Legacies. I was like, that's actually pretty dope. I really do love the 80s aesthetic of this episode. It's actually pretty dope. That's the choices in music and stuff like that. We'll get to it soon enough, but I love that whole situation. I was almost wondering, it didn't turn into that, but I was wondering, I was like, are they going to have like a certain amount of lives then? But it's like, no, it seems like they kind of got infinite lives. Just because like throughout the episode, they're constantly dying, being either run over by a DeLorean. They were wet from it being splashed on them. Then like Lizzie goes to blow dry her hair and they both get electrocuted. And it's just like an assortment of ways they die. They step on a claymore at one point in time. But basically I was curious like how this whole situation worked. I was like, okay, see some kind of supernatural creature, then why does she have this? It's like, okay, so what we find out later on is basically this is a prison. It's not a maze, it's a labyrinth, which is interesting. Because I was actually curious, well, what is the difference? And I like to kind of break it down. Basically, a maze has multiple exits, a labyrinth only has one. So it turns into this situation of like there's only one way out. You either one of you swaps with me and the other one gets to go free, or the Minotaur kills you, which is like obviously like that's the whole thing of like the Minotaur and the labyrinth and everything. But getting back to, because she's a regular lady, but it turns out like some years ago a sorcerer made this labyrinth to punish a woman who turned down his advances, and so someone comes in, gets trapped inside the maze, the labyrinth, and they end up having to pass it down to the next person, so on and so forth. And it seems like the last time anyone's had to deal with this was the 80s, because that's why the lady who was doing the keeper, everything's an 80s aesthetic, because I guess the labyrinths are built around what your personal experience. So because that's the most recent pop culture she knows, and I guess because pop culture is kind of her thing, that's why the entire aesthetic looks like that. Or it could be the situation of the last time she involved herself with anyone in general. I would assume that more so came from her respective situation of that's what she's familiar with. But it turns into that interesting conversation of like, okay, I remember, so we should tell everyone else, which obviously Hope is like, no, we can't do that, because she's afraid, because she came back, she saw Josie and Landon together, and it's like they're happy and she doesn't want to destroy that. And she's like, in her mind is like, everyone is happier without her, which, and I like what Lizzie was saying, like, no, like everyone's, it's like Landon's filling a hole in his heart from you. Josie's literally doing the same thing with about the whole Penelope situation. Me, I've got this made up boyfriend. My dad's not better off. So saying that like you being this missing piece is what kind of led things kind of falling apart, because we've all felt wrong, but we don't know why, because there's a big part of our lives. Because I think Hope doesn't realize how much of an impact she has on everyone's lives. So not being there, that hole is big and vast in every person. And they're trying to find, each person trying to find their own thing to kind of compensate for that missing piece in their life, essentially. Not everyone is quite whole. But now it turns into the whole conversation, because like for Hope, it's like my main purpose is like, that's why I was born, to stop Malivore. I'm the only one who can. I'm the only tri-bred in existence. So it's like, that's what I was born for. Which, you know, Lizzie brings up the fact is I was born to do this whole merge with my sister, you know? And so it turns into a whole thing of like, you know, both of them trying to be martyrs in their own right. So in Hope's mind is like, you get to go back. She does realize it is kind of, well, I think there's a beauty and kind of tragedy to the whole thing of like, no one will remember me anyway, so me staying behind won't matter. I mean, granted, you'll remember me, so I guess maybe, you know, Hope can look at it as like, at the very least, you'll know I exist. So that's better than being completely forgotten. Because for her, she was also thinking like, eventually I'm going to go back inside of Malivore to try and kill it once and for all. She still has to activate her vampire side. To be activated as a full tribrid, but even then, and you would assume, because she believes that to be what prevented her from fully killing Malivore, but for her it's like, I'd go into pit, everyone forget me anyway, so why go through the trouble reminding everyone? They're just going to end up forgetting. But for Lizzie, it's like, I might as well stay here because there's no magic here. I don't have to worry about, you know, her and Josie ever have to worry about that merge again, which is also interesting because it's like, well, we actually think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's actually kind of interesting because of this whole, you know, Gemini connection. And obviously we've referenced Kai because he's the last of the Geminis and all of that. And the fact of the matter is he's literally in kind of a similar prison. So I just think it's just, not ironic, but it's just interesting and coincidental in the grand scheme of things. Maybe that's supposed to mean something, maybe not, but still. Lizzie knocks Hope out and was going to make the sacrifice because it's like, hey, and I think that shows you growth in Lizzie, because the fact is that she was making this choice not only for her sister but also for Hope as well. She's like, because, you know, but you could also make the argument it's her trying to shot Hope by being like, well, I can be a bigger martyr than you. It's not that, but if you want to think about it, you can think of it in a fun way like that. But no, it's just showing her growth as a character. And she was going to make that sacrifice until, you know, but she noticed that it's almost interesting too, because remember, like, she kind of went through a similar thing last season with the Djinn, who was like, oh, be careful what you wish for type of thing. But the moment she hearing the Keeper's words specifically about, oh yeah, you'll be freed from this, like she referenced, I forgot what her exact words were, but it wasn't basically like, oh, she'll be set free. It's like, she'll be set free in another manner. So it's like, you said that specifically. So what's the catch? It's like, okay, the moment you take my place, the other person dies, but it's like, hey, at least one of you surviving is better than no one, right? Because if you don't take this option, you're both going to die by the Minotaur, and the bracelet's the only thing keeping them safe. So Lizzie breaks down. I love her being like, oh, I hope you know the maze as well as we do. I mean, labyrinth. I love that. And using Frank, who I love that was a thing of just kind of, it's so weird because it is, even though it is a labyrinth, there is still, I guess, real people in it. Because like the guy who shoots the arrows, Frank, they're like, you almost got us that time, Frank. He's like, sorry. Like I said, I just love that time they're like, oh, tripwire, arrow, and you're just like all dodging it at one point. Even like the spears coming up from the ground that ended up blocking the Minotaur at one point. But I love that he's coming towards Hope, and bam, arrow to the back of the head. And it's like, oh, nice shot, Lizzie. And it's like, oh, who's that? Yeah, this is Frank. And it's like, bye, Frank. It's like, oh, I love that. So they end up killing the what's his face? I'm blanking on the word already. Minotaur. And they were all able to escape, including the lady. Even though, you know, Josie was like, Lizzie was like, you don't deserve to escape, but hey, you know, you're kind of stuck in a crappy situation. Like I said, I love that, you know, and I think that shows you how much growth, because I think you could find Lizzie kind of like incomplete because of the growth she had during the course of season 1, but she was missing those key parts from Hope to kind of balance her out. And I think now that Hope's back, like, it kind of like connected all the dots, and just, I think we fully see her grow, fully seen her growth as a character in this particular regard, because now she remembers everything about Hope, and it kind of fills in some of those gaps, I think, and kind of makes her at least a little bit more whole. So I think that's kind of interesting in that regard. Another interesting thing is obviously this whole situation, because I will circle back to the Hope and Lizzie thing soon enough, but then there's the whole MJ and Sebastian situation, because he goes to the one person he can turn to, and that's Caleb. Now, what's really interesting is, like, I was wondering what this whole thing was, but he's basically desiccated, and it's like, okay, so he's basically using the little bit of blood that's kind of dripping to him. He's basically psychically connecting himself to people, which I'm wondering, was that his entire plan for Lizzie in the first place anyway? Or not? Because it didn't seem like, I guess he was trying to woo her at first and then slowly get her to go, oh, and now you can come and save me type of thing. Like, gain her heart first, and then she'll be so in love with you and so smitten with you, then you can get her to kind of bring you back to life. But it's really interesting because because obviously MJ didn't have the most noblest of intentions, because it's like, because, you know, and it shows you Sebastian's very good at getting inside of people's head, because he knows how important Lizzie is to him. It's like, oh, you know, you help free me. Like, oh, I'll help you out with Lizzie and everything. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing. So I just thought about it right now. I'm going on a tangent, and it's going to end up circling back to something I brought up earlier. I have to correct myself, because I made it seem like, oh, she remembers everything she knows. Lizzie remembers everything from the gin thing. I know she doesn't, but I should probably go ahead and clarify. Like, yo, I remember that she doesn't remember anything, but I think subconsciously on some level, it was because of that experience. Because even though she didn't 100% remember, it was like a scratch, like it's an itch she couldn't quite scratch type of thing. I think subconsciously it is somewhere there. I think her mind being the way it is, it helped her with the whole remembering Hope thing, and kept the demon or the Oni from completely possessing her. So I think it's kind of a similar circumstance. I know I kind of did that. I didn't mean to do that. So, but it was kind of floating in my head. So I was like, I might as well kind of say that. But circling back to what I was saying, I did like that Caleb and MG went to Alaric for help about this, and Alaric was like, if I were you, I wouldn't, because obviously Alaric's crossed enough vampires to know, like, if he's down there, yeah, I mean, the last set of desiccated vampires we came across were the originals, and so I'm sure many people are like, should have left the Michelson family where you found them. I mean, obviously Klaus did most of the desiccating in the family. It's like, oh, you pissed him off. He kind of puts you in that condition to kind of put you on punishment for God knows how long, until, you know, he finally gets over it, or, you know, he starts missing you, because, you know, family and everything. It is kind of important to Klaus in that regard. But regardless, and the fact is Caleb agreed with Alaric, even though I was like, oh, because we know that, because there was that thing before where Caleb had agreed with Alaric. It's like, showing his growth over the series, and even Alaric's like, I'm actually surprised you're listening to me. He's like, I mean, especially because him and Caleb kind of disagreed a lot in season 1, and it's like, especially because then you probably voted, you know, especially because y'all kind of voted, but for me to be out of the school. And then, like, you know, Caleb was like, actually, I'm the one person that voted for you. He knew there was one person, but he was under the assumption it was Josie. But it's like, no, it was Caleb out of anyone who voted for you. Now, that's got to sting in many different... It's like, oh, you're proud because, like, oh, Caleb's grown. But at the same time, it stings because, like, oh, my own daughter voted me out. Which... he confronts her about it, which her justification for it is like, well, no, you were right about the fact that the school needs to be run by a supernatural, you know, but the fact of the matter is you wanted to leave, but you just couldn't bring yourself to do it. So, you know, you kind of put the choice in our hands. You knew it was kind of the right thing to do, and I know it's the right thing to do. So I wanted to make you free of all of this so you can live your life, go out there, date and everything, which, hey, that opens the pathway for him and the sheriff potentially. We'll see. She might, you know, she was waiting for him, but because obviously Josie and Lizzie kind of come first because he felt like he wasn't there for them when the time came, this might kind of incentivize him to go like off and live his life. It's like, you kind of got to let us go and live our lives. Obviously, it's like, you're always going to be our dad, but it's just kind of like, you've taught us, you put us in a position where you built this place where we're safe. Now we got to move on to the next chapter of kind of embracing what we are fully and not, you know. So there's that whole situation. So I thought that was kind of neat. And then I like the fact is that Caleb tricked Sebastian into revealing. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, if you're not going to be honest, and Caleb, I mean, and then Sebastian ends up talking about like what he did to kind of get desiccated, and Caleb's like, yeah, I figured as much, and Sebastian's like, you tricked me. It's like, yep. Don't worry, I'm gonna come down here and burn your body after the dance. So I was like, huh. Which immediately, this is something I meant to bring up earlier. I think it is interesting that he can psychically get inside of people's head. That was a Silas thing, right? I think Silas is the only vampire with psychic abilities, just because he was on a different level than everyone else. But he was the only one that could do that, right? I don't remember any other vampire being able to do that. That's why I was under the assumption maybe he was just straight up dead, which to a certain extent I guess you can make the argument he technically is. He's in that limbo lane, I guess. But it's just interesting to me because I was like, huh. I think that sets him up to be very interesting because, I mean, maybe that's just like low level psychic stuff. Maybe I don't remember any other vampire doing that in that state. I don't remember anyone else doing that except Silas. He's the only vampire I remember with psychic abilities like that. Because remember, even in his state where he wasn't even awake yet, he was definitely getting in people's heads and screwing with them. So it's like, maybe there's some connection there. Maybe there's not. We'll see. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I do like the other side of things too, the whole Landon and Josie thing, because it's like, oh, like Lizzie's supposed to be going staying with a lark for a while, which Raphael's like, yo, you know what that means, right? He's like, wait, what? And he's like, no, it's not. It's like, yeah, the dance and everything. It's like, wait, what? And it starts making Landon freak out. I even love that he went to Dorian for advice, and he's just about, it's like, about that first time, he's like, and he's like, Dorian's like, oh, that's what okay. I love that whole thing and that just conversation. He's like, you'll get that look and you'll both look at each other and you'll just know. It's like he said everything while saying nothing is almost kind of what I kind of interpret. Because even I'm sitting there listening to Dorian, I was like, I get what you're trying to say, but what the fuck are you trying to say? It's the whole point. It's because it's like you're not explaining yourself well. But at the same time, like I said, I say that jokingly, but honestly, it doesn't make any sense. Of like, basically, you'll see and feel that spark. You'll know it's the time, essentially. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. I did like the fact is that they wanted to wait, and it's like, she's like, if you don't want to dance tonight, we don't have to. He's like, oh, good. Or were you actually talking about not dancing, or were we actually talking about sex? Or was sex supposed to be a metaphor? Dance supposed to be a metaphor for sex? And she's like, yeah. He's like, oh, okay, good. I just love how awkward they are. It's actually super adorable. But when it came time and everything, Caleb and MG killing on the dance floor. I'm like, yo! Like the music, like I said, the music choices are so good, especially when Landon was rushing to find a condom. I need a hero? Really? Hell yeah. I love that. He goes to Dorian and Dorian gives him the hookup. It's like, hey, this is the key to the nurse's office. This is the key to where you'll find what you need. And it's like, wow. Dorian coming through in the end. That's pretty dope. But there's also that part of you that's like, oh, you kind of wish that wasn't the case, because Lizzie and Hope show up just in time, which Lizzie's like, oh, stop them. But for Hope, it's like, no, the fact of the matter is it's because of what Lizzie said about there being another way. It's like they were able to find their way out of the maze because they were able to find another way by just killing the Minotaur. So there's always another way. So it's like a way for everyone to be happy, them to have their happiness, and me have my happiness. I guess it's just a situation of, basically, I have to move on from Landon. It's kind of where she kind of stands with it all. And I even love Lizzie being like, I know, she's like, hey, and if you ever tell anyone this, I'm going to deny it, but I'm so happy to have you back in my life, Hope. And they hug. I'm like, once again, Lizzie, who hated Hope, had issues with her so much last season, for it to be this point, for her to be like, I'm happy to see it. It's like, it's super adorable, dude. I'm like, yeah, new besties. That's so good. I would have never expected them to basically end up the besties that they are, so that's going to be pretty dope. Which is always interesting considering it's literally a switch of last season, because Josie and Hope had the better relationship, and now it's kind of vice versa now. Now Lizzie and Hope have the better relationship. That's it's so interesting. But what was also interesting about that part is that we see that Josie, waiting for Landon, finds like this book. I don't remember what that is. That must be something from season 1, or because it seems like it's something. It's like a journal that's writing itself, but it seems like it's pulling from Landon's memory. So what is it? I think maybe it was something like Hope enchanted to make it so that if he ever forgets anything, he doesn't have to forget it. I don't know. But it's stuff written by Landon. Obviously, it was stuff before the memory wipe, but it was still going. So maybe it's been writing all these months, writing all down the stuff that so he doesn't end up forgetting it. I don't remember. I don't remember it at all. So I'm wondering, like, what the hell that is. Because even whatever it is, it kept writing in that moment, even when Josie had opened up the book. And so then it turns into a thing of her hiding it from Landon. So the question is, does she know for sure, or is she just guessing? Like, does she think that this is something Landon's working on right now? This is how he really feels because it's a song about hope and everything. So it's like, oh, does he remember this, or is it just, is he playing dumb, or what? Or whatever the case may be, it's something she is hiding from him. He's still kind of in love and everything. So she's in the process of learning the truth, even though Hope was like, oh, I'm not going to let them know the truth. I'm just going to let them be happy. But the thing is, it might be her attempt to let them be happy might just kind of end up breaking Josie's heart and leading her down the wrong path, sadly enough. Which is interesting because now Hope is hanging out with Raphael, which has, this situation about to get complicated. I figured as much the moment it seemed like Raphael was kind of getting a thing for Hope. I mean, to be fair, he's had a thing for her since last season. He just never acted upon it because Landon and her were together. So now that it's like, he doesn't remember that whole thing. So it's like, they're taking steps potentially. They're hanging out. And I think in Hope's mind, it's like, well, I've got to move on too. Landon and Landon and Josie are happy together, so, time for me to move on. So I think that's definitely going to be interesting. So that's fascinating. Then it turns out poor Wade ended up waking Sebastian up. So, and the fact is, once again, when you look at Sebastian, I'm like, are you a Damon? Are you a Stefan, specifically a Ripper Stefan? Or you a Klaus? Either way, that's going to be interesting. So there's all of that. MG sees him escaping. It's like, that can't be good. Makes you wonder. You kind of hope that Wade's still alive, but maybe he's not. Poor bastard. It's like, Wade didn't have any real friends. I even love Landon going, Wade, because he was looking for a condom. And it's like, never mind. It's like, come on. Don't play Wade like that. Poor guy. Like I said, I hope he's okay, but we'll see next episode, hopefully. And then there's the whole thing of Alaric kind of passing the torch to Vertimus, kind of being like, fact of the matter is, you're looking after people I love and care about, so don't screw up the job. Do better than me at the school and everything. It's like, he passed the torch and everything. And then we get the reveal of like, Vertimus is actually Clark. I'm like, I kept wondering, like, what was up with that. I figured Clark had to be freaking. We knew he was, but I just wasn't sure what to make of it. It should have made sense to me at that time of what that whole situation was. The whole him eating the beast and everything. And then even the fact is that he ends up devouring the lady because he's like, he can smell Malivore on her. But then there's a thing of like, he wraps around her like clay or dirt or whatever. And then like blood splatters on like the bartender's face. So it's like, okay, so was that him eating her? Like, I guess maybe it's like it's a complete devour in the sense that rather than sending them back to the pit, any creatures that were that are free or taken care of, he eats them to make him stronger or what? But the fact is he morphs himself like that, which he didn't do before. Does that mean that he's kind of like a piece of his father went with him? So he has some of his father's abilities. So he's probably indestructible like his dad. Probably the only thing that can kill him at this point is her, which now once again it brings up the whole conversation about, well, who the hell is that kicking it in the red robes? Which is also interesting. Something else I brought up too is like, well, that means there are multiple people coming out of Malivore at once. That means because Clark's out here already, so it's like, how the hell are other people? Because it's only supposed to be one at a time. But maybe because Clark is here, maybe Hope leaving shifted things. Maybe Clark leaving shifted things. Maybe he has an exception because he's more tied to his father now. He's more like his father. Maybe that's it. I mean, he was already kind of more like his father anyway, because his father molded him after him anyways. So it begs the question, like, maybe he was always like that, but he never showcased any of that in season 1. So that's why I feel like it's a little bit of a mutation thing. So maybe it's like, I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and see, but it's like, okay, so now he's leading Josie down a darker path, but I guess it's because he needs one of them because they can siphon off magic. Maybe they're meant to be, he's setting this whole situation up because she's meant to be a weapon to kill Hope, because she's the Tribred, she's the weapon against Malivore, or maybe Josie's magic is going to be used for the case of helping free Malivore, which obviously has something to do with those other two rogue figures. Not unless one of those rogue figures was Clark, but then it begs the question, who's the other one? So many questions. So I'm so interested to ultimately see where things end up taking us going forward in the next episode, especially because I wish I didn't see it, but I saw a glimpse of the preview of the next episode, saw a familiar face, and I was like, yo! What's that going to turn into, especially with the complicated situation of where everything stands right now? Obviously, you watch the preview, you might get a hint of who I might be referencing. If you don't watch it, when you watch the next episode, you'll be like, that might be the person that Michael was talking about. Regardless, I'm very excited to see what ends up going down. And now moving on to this week's episode of Evil. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have like three, I forgot what their positioning was, but basically they're people sent by the Pope to investigate this whole Grace situation to find out whether she was a real prophet or a false prophet. It's so interesting because the whole desperation to find out whether because the whole thing, and it's even something David had pointed out last episode, more so than anything, they want to prove that she's not a real prophet because a lot of the stuff that she potentially prophesied, at least if she is a prophet, that means a lot of that stuff is going to come true, meaning like fires and a lot of death and stuff like that. So obviously they want it not to be true. So these three are interviewing both David, Kristen, and Ben. And it was so interesting too because during the interview with David, they're speaking Italian, and he starts speaking Italian. They're like, "Whoa, you know Italian?" Is like, "Yeah." It's like, boom. So no secret conversations between you. But then they start asking personal questions like, "Oh, so what religion do you embrace, Ben?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm Muslim." He's like, "Whoa." He's like, "We're not about to go down this path." He's like, "I'm out of this interview." And even Kristen, they end up asking her what kind of birth control she's on. I'm like, what the hell is up with that? And even David was like, whoa. What kind of questions did you ask? I even love Ben and Kristen are listening at the door. And Kristen's like, what is he saying? It's like, oh, he's giving them the business, and that nice, priestly way. And so I like that because basically for him, it's like going forward, my team's personal lives are off the table. I even love that moment where Kristen's like, if, David, you'll tell us if, we ever kind of interfere, get in the way of, you doing your job as a priest. He was like, it's never going to come to that. And it's like, oh, and even Ben being like, oh, that makes me feel all tingly or whatever. I was like, oh, it's such a sweet moment. But this case in particular is very interesting. Obviously, it's another exorcism, which is so interesting. We're kind of getting one so soon. We got we were about to start an exorcism. Didn't happen. We do an exorcism. Things potentially work out, depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, I think that we worked out, but still, it's like, it seems like it's a demon thing. Maybe it what, but now it's another exorcism. So I think we're going to be getting these a lot more frequently, maybe. We went from 0 exorcisms to 2 fairly back to back, and I find that fascinating. But nevertheless, it is the whole situation of this case being a little complicated because this particular person, her name's Bridget, she's possessed. The demon's name is Howard, so it's a thing of okay, so she's possessed by this demon, and this demon claims they have killed someone, and so now it's a thing of okay, so what do we do if they're kind of in this complicated situation because they have to find out, for one, if this murder is real or not. And that once again, kind of almost, it's a little shady, but I guess it makes sense in a certain regard. But it is more so than anything, the church is worried about the liability because it's a thing of well, it was actually the demon that killed this particular person, not Bridget, but that's a technicality. You can't really bring that into court. So obviously that's what they're investigating. And obviously Kristen's asking questions. Well, because she actually asked a friend of hers, Mira, who's a cop, about it. And Mira's like, whoa, how do you know about these details? About the fact is, it turns out it's not just one case. There's actually 3 cases of young boys that kind of fit that description of the first victim disappearing. And so it's like they're all keeping it disappearances for now, but truth be told is the cops are looking at it as murders, potentially a serial killer. So now they have, and obviously David thinks this is a demon, but obviously Kristen doesn't believe it's a demon. And that's what this leads to an interesting divide again. She's like, yeah, I like our debates, but the fact of the matter is, obviously she looks at things from a psychological standpoint. He's looking at things from a supernatural standpoint. He believes it to be a demon. She believes that maybe she has like a multiple personality, a dissociative personality disorder, saying that it was like one of her other personalities that committed murder. So now it's that whole thing of like, yeah, but like I know about the killer. My friend's pumping me for information, but I technically can't tell anything because of the purview of my job. But I don't think it's just, this isn't protected under that religious thing. I think it's more so because, and it's something that David kind of points out, it's like technically you're an employee to the church, and the fact is the church is working on this. You were brought in as kind of a psychologist, so technically making Bridget your patient. So there's patient doctor confidentiality in this regard. But then it's like, okay, so it leaves her in that complicated thing, especially because Mira comes to her and is like, yo, like, you should keep this in mind. It's like, here's these 3 pictures, almost trying to guilt her into it. But it's like, something, this person might kill again. Like, I have with these situations, it's not like the killer's just going to stop. They're going to keep going. But, so she has to ask the question of like, okay, are you going to kill again? If she gets confirmation, then she can actually bring it to her friend Mira. But the problem is, Howard kind of gets into her game. It's like, oh, I know what you want. Basically, you want me to confess to like whether or not I commit more murder so you can turn me into the cops. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to do what you want. It's like, why? It doesn't matter to you. Yeah, but it matters to you. So that's why I don't want to do it. So it turns into that, complicated situation. But then it seems like it's not just Howard. It does seem like she has other personalities. So it takes the whole situation of maybe she isn't 100% like possessed. Maybe she does kind of have a dissociative personality disorder. I mean, the case takes like many different turns. I mean, I like because at first it's like, oh, her husband Dwight calls the cops on her. I'm like, why are you doing that? I guess for him it's like, oh, I just can't take anymore. But it's like, you brought the church in and everything. You're getting your wife, an exorcism and everything. So it's like, what's up with that? And it's like, but he turns his wife in, and I'm like, huh. Especially because I was thinking it was going to come back to bite Kristen because like she told Mira where the bodies were. She was like, I'm not going to tell you who the killer is, but I'm going to tell you where the bodies are buried. And I thought that Mira would kind of take leaps and bounds and ends up I thought she would end up finding her way to Kristen and to Bridget. I thought that's what was going to, but no. Dwight handled that on his own, but then kind of piecing everything together that he calls the cops and everything, it starts Kristen thinking that basically he's the one that committed the murders, and there's almost like this thing where like a dominant person could basically coerce someone into believing they did all this stuff. I mean, if he's the killer, he has all the details. All he has to do is manipulate her into regurgitating it. I guess with her condition too, it can make it seem like, I guess he wanted to kind of cover it up. Probably he didn't want to ever have to worry about it. Like if everything kind of went to shit, it's like, hey, she'll be the fall guy in this situation. But probably I don't know if that was the whole plan the entire time, or whether that ended up just being kind of like a last minute decision. Well, because it seemed like you would have to do some coercion because ahead of time for her to already spew it, so that had to be the end result. But then like, why call in a church? I guess because he was hoping like, well, she gets some insanity plea or something like that. Maybe that's what he was kind of hoping for. I don't know what he was really planning for, bringing in the church and all that, but still. David goes to confront him, and you see him pulling it. He's like, oh, I was covering up this. Oh, it's my wife. What kind of husband am I? And he kind of takes a very stern face. He picks up the knife and tries to attack David, but David got him and choked him out. It's like, hell yeah. So he's going down, and obviously Bridget is getting released. So hopefully she's just getting the medical care she needs, because it turns out I don't know. The ending kind of makes it seem like, hey, maybe she was actually possessed, but even if she was possessed, maybe she wasn't the one behind all this. But it does seem more like a personality disorder that I guess she finally shifted back into Bridget after everything, which is kind of messed up at the end to think about. Like, oh yeah, your husband committed all these atrocious murders, and he was basically coercing you into confessing to stuff that you didn't do. So it started off a little complicated, but the case got a little less complicated because of that angle to the whole situation. So there's that aspect to the episode. Another interesting aspect, to bring a little levity, before we get back into the serious stuff, I love that obviously Mira showed up and she saw David and Kristen together, and it's like, wait, hey, wait, you're a priest? It's like, yeah, I got to go do priest stuff. And she goes, what are you up to, Fleabag? I lost my mind. I was like, hey, a Fleabag reference. Side note, if you've never seen the TV show Fleabag, it's on Amazon Prime Video. It is a great show. It is a dark comedy. It is so damn good. And if you're on, maybe you're listening to this and you've never seen Fleabag, like that's referencing something from season 2. The main protagonist, Fleabag, because a lot of the characters in the show don't actually have names. That's kind of like their thing. Who she's played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Basically, Fleabag has a thing with a hot priest. That's literally what his name is, hot priest. So yeah, I just lost my mind because I never correlated that in my head. I was like, all right, she is with the, yeah. I never, it would have, if it wasn't for this episode, I would have never put 2 and 2 together in that regard. But I love that. I'm like, I referenced Fleabag. I love that. I don't know. That show's so good, it needs to be referenced more. But regardless, I went on a bit of a tangent. Like I said, I just want to kind of add in a little more like levity to what's kind of a depressing episode in a certain regard. I mean, a lot of these episodes are depressing in that regard, so. What's interesting, though, is that obviously Kristen, Ben, and David get to look at the prophecy book. Obviously, the priests are there like, okay, we'll slowly turn it. It is very interesting because it was like you're so adamant about them not seeing it, but you're the ones that brought it from all the way from Italy, but I guess it's because they were hoping to get in, like, hey, if they can get in contact with Grace, if they can figure that whole situation out, first figure out if she really is a prophet, then probably try and track her down, try to get her back there to see what else she can figure out about it. But nevertheless, I'm curious to see if that, really quickly since I'm on that subject, I am curious to see if Grace will circle back around, because basically they're worried that Grace, being sent back to China, they'll try to like reprogram her to kind of like, I guess kind of like, turn her back more towards. I don't want to say anything because I'd be talking out ignorance, but it was like almost sounded like basically a reprogramming that she would basically have to be going through. So once again, I'm ignorant on a lot of the ways things operate in China. So I would assume that was kind of based on something real that does happen, of like, I guess kind of like believing in China in a sense of everything, like no, don't get twisted. Like China is good. China is great. The way things are running great. That's what I'm trying to get across of. Maybe that's what that's supposed to mean. I don't know. Like I said, I could be completely misinterpreting that. But regardless, I am curious to see if she ends up circling back in the show, especially because they're going to be, looking into this so much of like the church is very invested in this, her particular circumstances. So they're going to try and track her down and probably, try and get to her before anyone else does about this. What was interesting, because I was wondering about this too, is like, oh, what about the guard that threw away the notepad? It's like, oh, he suddenly disappeared. Oh, he was there just to make sure that they didn't get all that, which they did watch some tapes. Recordings from the camera, and so they got some of it, not all of it. What was interesting, though, is obviously there's one particular page. It's got all these like symbols on the sigils, actually, but the legend is gone from the page. But then, like, Kristen recognizes one of the symbols. It turns out one of those symbols is from her book, one of the diaries that Leland left her daughters, and so she brings David into the fold, explain everything. He's like, wait, what? He was here. Wait, what? He was dating your mom. What? She's like, I got it handled. But basically, I think David's worried because he knows what kind of a person Leland is. And, she's like, I've handled it. It's like, but that's the thing. I think Leland is a type of person that's not going to give up easily. He's good. Even though he can't come at you at a direct angle, he's going to find some way to kind of loophole its way around it. We haven't circled back to it, but there is the whole thing with her mom, Kristen's mom, like what that ending of last episode meant for her, like in the grand scheme of things. Like I guess that was kind of like, oh, I was wondering if it meant the thing passed on to her, but it's like, no, it's probably supposed to represent the fact is he's damned your soul, that he's basically started you down a path of evil, or maybe it's just a straight up thing of like, oh, your soul is damned, you're kind of bound for hell. Maybe that's what it's kind of hinting at. Maybe it's actually a combination of the two, that basically he set you down a path that will lead you to being damned. Maybe not. We'll ultimately have to wait and see in that regard. But circling back around, we do start noticing like this, because when David confronted Dwight, he ends up looking like on the other side of the board where Dwight was hiding the weapons and all the evidence and stuff like that, the souvenirs and the weapon. it turns out there was another sigil there, which they had taken pictures of all the sigils, because the sigils all represent one of the 60 different demons, the ones that constantly get referenced, which obviously, David and Kristen had their very different perspectives on it. Because obviously, we learn what is potentially Leland's real name, Anatus, like that's basically his demon name, that basically he controls a legion of 30, which that might be something we see kind of where things are kind of currently set up. We'll get to that soon enough. But basically, he feeds off of almost kind of like the evil in people, them kind of pushing them down dark paths and stuff like that. And obviously, Kristen kind of does her psychological representation of it, being like, oh, so you're saying that he kind of gets his thrills or whatever by, doing that, but like obviously a non-supernatural response. So he's like, if David's like, well, if that's your need, if that's how you need it to be broken down for you, to make it clear for you, it's like, okay. So it's like they're on the same wavelength. They're just looking at it from it's the same thing, just from two different perspectives. She's trying to ground it in reality with psychology. He's grounding his position and thoughts on it through a more supernatural lens. So I don't think she is in the realm of thinking like, oh, this is really demons and stuff like that. But she's thinking that they're taking this demon mythology and added that basically it's a whole conversation. It's kind of similar to a Prodigal Son, where it's like, oh, psychopaths talk to each other. They find the kinship. So it's like, oh, all these psychopaths are pulling from the same mythology of these demons and stuff like that and kind of make it their own. Now, the reason why I say it's interesting with the whole Leland thing of, oh, he leads a legion of 30. He's manipulating this dude named Sebastian, which is, this episode just makes you go, oh, it's sad that incel thing is real, that people really believe it. Like, oh, I deserve sex. Women, I deserve love from women. It's like, Jesus Christ, dude. That sucks that you go through life believing that. Like, it just, I don't know. There's a small part of me that's like, I actually kind of feel bad for you. But then, like, obviously some people act upon it, which we're seeing that in the show, which I'm like, man. Because it makes it sad, because you're like, that's a real world thing, sadly. That's super fucked up. But basically, I wonder he was in the bathroom and everything. Part of me wonders, is like, did he shit in that box and give it to her? And the fact is, he kind of got all, because like Leland's talking about, oh, the fact of the matter is, we shouldn't go around women. They should go around us. That kind of like very, like straight up misogynistic way of thinking of like, I'm the man. I deserve this. I'm a man. I'm a man. Women should be glad to service me type of mentality. So, but the fact is, it seems like Leland, obviously it makes you wonder, like Sebastian, for example, take him for example. It seems like that was already there. Leland, he probably looks at it, he's like, oh, I see a spark of darkness in there. Let me fan the flames a little bit, I know I went from spark to flame, but I think it still works. But regardless, I think he can see it in people. He knows exactly what people to target. He's like, I can see it in you. Makes you wonder, did he meet up with those other people that's a part of this incel army? Which, okay, that's a fucking thing. Just because of that, like, because it seemed like Leland was watching it, which now they're talking about, oh, how about we take them out? It's like, oh, I don't mean take them out like that, with a gun or a car. And I'm like, Jesus. And I'm like, because it's like, in his mind, it's like, oh, she was flirting with me. Why'd she give me a nickname? It's like, but didn't she give everyone a nickname? Didn't the lady literally behind you have a nickname? Because that's her way of remembering. It's like, oh, she associates what you order with your face. I thought that was the thing. Maybe not the case at all, Maybe that's just kind of her thing. Maybe it's the same thing of like, oh, calling you like whatever, like calling you latte might mean the fact is it might be her way to kind of associate, not just maybe you don't want lattes, but it's like, oh, this person wants like a blueberry muffin or something. Maybe that's her way of associating, or maybe they're straight up, because I didn't remember what he actually got, because I think she called him like blueberry muffin or something like that, but like, and it's like, and it's not like she was shitty of like, ew, gross. It's like, no, I'm sorry, that's sweet, I'm in a committed relationship. That was a perfectly normal response, but it's like, he felt, whatever. It's just nuts. So I'm thinking we're probably going to see, sadly, that situation that Leland's concocting grow, especially because they talk about the fact of him having a legion and whatever, at least 30. So that might be kind of the angle that they're going down. But another interesting twist to this episode was the fact is that we David saw another symbol and he recognized it, and he looks through these art books and it's like, oh, so you think this artist might be kind of connected in some way, maybe kind of a killer, or at the very least maybe a demon, or maybe at least in Kristen's mind and Ben's mind it's like, oh, maybe it's a killer, or at the very least in David's mind they might be a demon or whatever, or at least associated in some shape or form to evil. And it's like, oh, who's the artist? I was expecting David to be like me, but it's like, it's his dad. I was like, now that's an even greater twist, which is actually, it's a little heartbreaking when you actually think about it. Well, because, Mike Coulter played Luke Cage, and Luke Cage definitely had some dad issues, which just got resolved in Luke Cage, which is sad just because, I know the actor who played his dad, Reg, ended up passing away. I never looked into the circumstances because I don't want to. I that goes down a rabbit hole, and I'm just like, that's too depressing. I don't even want to know how it happened, but regardless, that's what made my mind. I just thought it was kind of interesting. So whatever the case may be, once again, I'm going a bit of a tangent and everything, like I always do. It's at this point in time, it's like it's a very expected thing. So I apologize in advance, and for all the future tangents I'm definitely going to end up going on. So, but it set up some very, very interesting things this episode. So I'm curious to see where they end up taking all of this going forward, especially with Kristen's mom, because I wonder, has Kristen's mom been around since then? Is that just more so her choice? Is there, because I think it's interesting because Leland kind of, I guess that was him planting that seed of like, oh, that'll kind of grow into something else on its own. Let me go do all this other duplicitous stuff. Let me start evoking my evil schemes. Like I said, in the end, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where it all takes us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.